According to the most recent survey from Babson Research Group, it found that online courses are gaining popularity in America. The group discovered that at least 30% of higher educational learners are taking at least one distance or online course as of December of last year, making it imperative that the educational equity and value is present to ensure students of all ages and abilities have access to a diverse learning experience. Dr. Kyle Clayton is an instructional designer at the University of Oklahoma. It's his job to consult on course design and content production, to support faculty, to ensure that all students have equal opportunity to maximize their learning experience. In his work, Clayton is constantly cognizant of the fact that access to opportunity to learn isn't the same for all students. So, when he designs courses, he wants to ensure that it's a level playing field for all students of all abilities. The diversity of thought and collaboration are two of the greatest aspects of Clayton's job and what he enjoys doing the most, collaborating with people and maximizing the results and potential of students. He joined me this week to talk about everything from educational equity, designing and structuring courses for student success, and the future and viability of online learning. If you're an educator at any level, it's imperative you stick around because Clayton delivered some nuggets of information we can all learn from. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to be with you this morning to talk about educational equity and designing courses, my friend. Great to see you this morning, and happy Oklahoma Thursday, my friend.
Yeah. We're supposed to get some rain today and some bad weather today, so hopefully nothing too wild.
Well, I have to tell you, buddy, I live in Canada, and we're expecting a rain-snow mix tomorrow. Hopefully it's the last snowstorm of the season, right?
Yeah, we don't get a ton of snowstorms here. We get hail and tornadoes and high winds, the really fun stuff.
Well, you're right in the middle of tornado country, right?
Yes.
That must be fun, isn't it? Adventurous, if nothing else, right?
Yes. I don't know if it's fun, but yes, it does. Provide some adventure and excitement.
Absolutely. So, Kyle, I know your day job is fascinating. As an instructional designer, you help faculty there at the University of Oklahoma support their students' learning by facilitating opportunities for faculty to enhance or advance their online learning experience. So I'm fascinated to start our conversation by asking you just to give me a 360-degree view of your job, and what makes it so fabulous.
Yeah. So I've been doing it for almost 3 years now, and I've really enjoyed it. One of the things that I've really learned is depending on where you work, and like if we're doing interviews and hiring for people, this is one of the big things we kind of go over with them is instructional design work really looks different depending on where you're at, what the goals are of where you work. So sometimes instructional designers will do a lot of concrete content creation. So maybe they create PowerPoints or trainings or things like that. But in our office at the University of Oklahoma, we really work as project managers for those courses. And so we will work with the instructors. Their goal really is to still create their content, but we'll help them organize the content, help them to kind of craft. We always try to have course goals and then module goals as well for each week. And so we really work with them to kind of create those, fine tune those, align those as well, kind of with their assessments, so whether that be their tests or if they have written assessments or if they're doing lectures or readings, right? So we want to make sure all of the things they're asking students to do align with those goals that they've set, so that we're not just asking students to do things that don't make sense or don't really fit within the content of the class. And so all of that's then placed in an LMS, a learning management system, and we try to structure that material in there in a manner that limits student questions and kind of limits the problems that students may encounter throughout the semester. So we try to make sure that the content's clear, the goals are clear, the instructions are clear for them, so that as instructors are working on the course and teaching the course, they have more time for instruction, more time to provide feedback, and just more time to meet with students when student questions do arise, so that they're not spending as much time throughout the semester just answering questions about when an assignment may be due or how a student's supposed to submit an assignment. So we try to make sure that that stuff is clear. So yeah, we really try to support students or instructors, I should say, as kind of a project manager, and really kind of guide them through that process of developing that course, because we work with instructors that have varying levels of experience teaching online, varying levels of just teaching in general. And so we really try to guide them through that process of getting that content ready, making sure that content's accessible, making sure it's in a location students can easily find it, and then working to help answer any questions they may have about the learning management system, utilizing video, utilizing any other kind of external content.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Kyle, with the increased popularity of online learning after COVID, my friend, I'm also curious to ask you, how much of your job is ensuring educational equity for students and really making sure that they can maximize their online learning experience?
Yeah, it is. And so we really work, right. The way we try to make sure things, are, equity is being provided, right, that students have equal access to everything. And so the first thing we really try to focus on is how we structure the courses, and place the material in there. So if a student comes into a program from, as they move from one course to the next course, that they can easily access that material. So they're not searching for things. So let's say in their first class of a program, they have to learn a little bit of where things are, but then as they go to the next course, that information or similar information is placed in the same format, in the same structure. And we try to make sure that each week has a checklist so students know exactly what they're supposed to do throughout the week. And then we have various processes within our office and outside of our office that we implement before course runs, during the course running, and after the course running to provide feedback. We have quality checks, and we check a lot of things for accessibility as well. And we try to make sure that everything that we put on there, right, we're trying to consider as many things as possible so that we are allowing students to access that material and have success. And then beyond just kind of those, meeting those quality standards or meeting those accessibility standards, we really work to encourage faculty to be flexible in what they're doing, because even if we design what we think is a near perfect course and we get it out there, there's almost inevitably going to be an issue with something, or maybe there's a problem we couldn't have encountered, or maybe there's a new situation a student's dealing with that we couldn't have encountered beforehand. And so we really try to encourage faculty to be flexible with whether it be deadlines, due dates for assignments, whether it be how a student submits an assignment, or things like that. And so we really try to have faculty to be flexible and really encourage them kind of to treat each student right as an individual, work with them on that individual basis, and kind of treat each situation that may arise kind of as a unique situation, so that because there's not really in all of education, right, there's not ever going to be one solution that works for every student that an instructor may encounter. And so I think it's important we try to build that into the structure, but then just encouraging faculty, right, to be flexible and approach those situations kind of as unique situations where sometimes they require unique approaches and solutions to solve them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking about the structure of courses, as you said, not all students learn the same way, so there isn't one size that fits all. So I'm curious if we can dive deeper into the structure of designing courses and whether there are particular principles that you haven't shared with me yet that go into your line of thinking or decision making when you structure or design a course.
Yeah, really the things that I'm thinking of and really talk the most about. And there's a ton of developmental models, right? And they all kind of trying to follow the same structure, and ultimately the goal is the same. For most of those, the things that I really try to focus on outside of that is just consistency in the course and ease of use. So when I'm thinking of consistency, I want to make sure week to week, if students have to read or if they have to complete a quiz or whatever that task they need to do, that it's very clear and that things are consistent from week to week, and that if we're utilizing due dates for assignments, that those are consistent as well. So we don't want to have something due on a Tuesday, have the same assignment next week be due on a Friday, or put the time different, right? So we just want things to be consistent for students, because then it gives them more time. They're not worried about, okay, well, this quiz is due on Tuesday, but then my next quiz is due on Friday. Or this week we had a discussion, next week we don't have a discussion for the next 2 weeks. So that in that consistency, it limits the amount of cognitive load that they're having to utilize to plan and think about what they need to do, and that they're able to spend more time on the course material, whether that be reading or watching lectures or watching external tools, or if they need to learn a software, right? So they're given more time to do that. So if the course, is consistent, things are easy to find. There's ease of use in the course, right? They can find the readings, they can find the course syllabus, they can easily find the instructions for an assignment, and things like that. They have more time, they have more mental capacity then to work on those things that they need to be working on, whether that be readings, watching lecture videos, completing assignments, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kyle, I'm also fascinated to get your your perspective on the term lifelong learner, and what does that mean to you, my friend?
Yeah, that's something, I think we in education talk about pretty regularly, and it's really something that was, I think, was a focus of graduate school as well. We talked about it a lot in terms of how do we, just move from learning right to complete the task or complete that immediate goal to developing those skills to be a lifelong learner so that you can continue learning beyond that current moment. So yeah, for me, lifelong learning is someone's desire, right, to continue to grow and learn. And this can look different, I think, depending on the context and the content that they're needing to learn. So sometimes for work, right, we need to have those skills to continue growing and developing our skill set, or maybe learning a new tool that we come across. Something right now I know for education that's been kind of a hot topic is the use of AI. So something like Chat GPT, right? Using that to create text for assignments and things, right? So that's something as educators and working in education, right? That's not going away. So it's something that we have to take, use those skills as a lifelong learner to learn about how does that apply, what's its usefulness, and things like that. So sometimes we have to learn a new tool for work. Sometimes, lifelong learning includes just learning something for fun. Maybe it's an interest outside of work or outside of, your normal daily activities. You're just like, oh, that's an interesting topic. I'm going to learn about that. So you have to have those skills to do that. So I think that includes somebody learning how to be self-directed and self-regulate that learning. So somebody that's self-directed can say, okay, to learn a skill for work, maybe it's not required, but you're like, I need to learn this so that I can do my job most effectively. So how are you going to do that? What's your goals, right? You have to direct that learning. And then in terms of self-regulation, right, you have to be able to kind of regulate when you're working on that, how you're working on it, and how long you're going to work on it as well. So I think you have to have those skills, right, to then be able to continue learning throughout life. And like I said, you can learn something new, whether it be for work or just for interest or something just for fun, right? But I think it's important to develop some of those skills that are tied to being self-directed and being able to direct your learning and those self-regulation skills so that maybe, as you're learning a new skill for work, you're not spending 24 hours a day working on it, and that you're kind of regulating your time that you spend on that so that you're still working on the tasks that you need to work on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is a constant game of learning, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I think, yeah. And I think you have to always be ready and willing to learn something new, regardless of how long you do something. So, I mean, I've only been doing instructional design work professionally for 3 years, which isn't very long, but each year there's something new that it's like, okay, we kind of need to, maybe it's a skill, or maybe it's a piece of technology, or maybe it's just a workflow process, right? So there's always something that is needing to be learned throughout that. Yeah. So you have to, I think, moving forward in life requires that to be learning new skills and new information, wherever that may fit into what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kai, you had mentioned that you've only been doing this work for a few years, but so tell me about your path and what led you to dive into this portion of your career. What do you like so much about it?
Yeah. So I worked out of college directly. I worked in some mental health. And I got kind of interested in counseling and just kind of working with people on that level. And so then I went back to school and started working on my master's, and really began to enjoy the process of learning more so than I had previously. And so then went into getting my Ph.D. In educational psychology, which then kind of just by happenstance kind of got into instructional design work. And so probably didn't know as much about it as I thought I did, and kind of what that entailed when I started. So kind of got into it just by accident a little bit. And so, so I really have enjoyed doing it. In terms of, what I enjoy about it, it's just the different people and different groups of people that I get to interact with each day, each week, and each month. There's always different problems that have to be solved. There's different challenges that have to get overcome throughout that as well. And so it's really an enjoyable experience pretty much each day, kind of working through those different problems, kind of learning to work with different people, because, I have, as an instructional designer and just the way I work, I may prefer a certain workflow or a certain way of doing things. But when you're working with different instructors who have differing levels of experience, they may have a way that they want to work as well. So they may have a workflow they want to follow. And so it's just kind of learning to work with other people and kind of learning to kind of work within their workflow as well. And so that, I think that's really enjoyable because it creates just the environment's different every day, and kind of what I'm doing, kind of how I'm having to work, and things like that. So I think that for me, that's what's most enjoyable, is just having those different experiences and getting to kind of work, like I said, with a vast range of people with differing backgrounds, experiences, and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the ultimate social and professional experiment, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's never a dull day in your job, I'm sure, right?
Very rarely. Yeah. I get a little worried if it gets dull. It makes me think things are about to go really wrong.
Well, that just challenges you to keep it more interesting, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Kyle, I'm also curious to ask you about the future of online learning and what you think that's headed with the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. That's something, I think anybody that works in online education or where that's a focus is we really are thinking about, okay, what's that look like? Yeah, in 5-10 years, right? We can look back and see how much it's grown. And I think that there's a lot of growth that's taken place. And I think really the goal of online learning is to make education, especially at higher ed levels, more accessible to more individuals, because it allows people to kind of work around their own schedules, right? So you don't necessarily, if you're in an online program, you're not going to class throughout the day, right? So you can typically still work, do your family functions, right? And kind of do work when you have time and kind of build that into your schedule instead of building your schedule around it. So I think that's kind of the goal of online learning. And I think we are doing better, right, than we were even maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And there's still a lot of growth to be had. And I really think that growth is going to start to focus kind of on undergraduates, especially those who have began maybe college and not finished for whatever reason, and they've got credit. So how do we get those students back into kind of finish up their degrees? How can we, accommodate whatever they've done previously to make that as easy and seamless for them to finish that? So yeah, I think for me, I think for online education, the growth that's going to happen is just continuing to make it more accessible, making it an easier process for students to get started, and not necessarily punishing students, whether they're undergrads or graduates, right? If they have to take time off from school for whatever reason, maybe their job gets more complicated or busy, or maybe they have a life event, whatever that may be, right? Students should be able, I think, to easily kind of come back into that and continue where they left off. So I think that's kind of the future of where online education is headed, is making sure, one, that it's accessible to more people, and that it's easier for those maybe who have started and not finished something, for them to come back and pick up kind of right where they left off and finish that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kyle, we talked earlier about educational equity and equality on a more larger scale, but I want to narrow it down to students with disabilities. You know, Kyle, I was born with cerebral palsy, and certainly I learn differently than a non-disabled person, or I just have a different learning style than most people. I'm more of a visual learner than a book learner. So tell me about really making sure that courses are inclusive for all students, but particularly for students with disabilities as well.
Yeah, and I think so. In our office, we have we have accessibility standards that we work to meet, and so we try to make sure every course is meeting those. So regardless, right, of whatever somebody's disability might be, that they're able to access the material, they're able to learn the material, and they're able, right, then to apply that material and have success in the course. And so we try to make sure that whatever material we're using is presented in multiple formats, right? So we try to have, if instructors are doing videos, and we send all of those videos off to be professionally captioned, so that those are there. We always are checking videos for the audio levels and all of that, so that we make sure that it's the audio level is discernible, regardless of somebody's hearing, right? And we're also checking, another big thing we always check as well, is in that we're always aware of if we're posting things on there, can these, are these usable with a screen reader? Are the colors on there going to be visible to somebody who may have a color blindness, right? So we want to make sure, we work to make sure, I should say, that all of those things are accessible. And at the university level as well, they do try to provide and make people aware of any accommodations somebody may need regarding their disability as well. So sometimes we have to make some adjustments to meet those as well. But our goal, when we're designing courses, is that we're already doing those things, right? So that when we get accommodations for whatever that may be, whether it be for videos to be captioned, right, because we're already doing that, whether it be PDFs to make sure that they're accessible via screen readers or things like that. We're trying to already do those things so that all of that course material is accessible to people with varying, disabilities that may, like you said, I think you said more visual than being able to read a textbook, right? And making sure that those things are already being done, and that we aren't just saying, hey, here's a textbook, you have to be able to read it. But so sometimes it's using digital textbooks, like making sure those other resources, and that they're accessible through different formats, right? And that it's not just, here's the text, read the text, but also here's, maybe some videos to accompany the text, or here's the audio version of the text as well. And so we're trying to meet those needs before we know about them. Obviously, that's not always possible. Sometimes we find stuff out later. And so then we work to make those adjustments, and make sure that we're taking those things into account for future offerings of that course, or just in future course developments.
It's kind of like educational preventative maintenance, right, Kyle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Kyle, I'm fascinated talking to you to learn where your passion individually for education comes from. Why do you love impacting students and education in general?
Yeah, I think it stems, I didn't always like being in the educational system, and that I've always enjoyed learning, though. And that really came from my grandfather, who really always kind of pushed us all to be learning things. He was never the person you could ask you could never ask him the answer to a question, then he'd give you the answer. He always made you work for the answer, and kind of made us all follow the scientific method, right? Of kind of thinking of a hypothesis, making predictions, and then kind of trying to test that question so that we could find the answer. And so he always was pushing us to learn. And so I think, all of, that's kind of where I would say my passion for learning in general came from. And that was from a young age, and then in school, education wise, didn't necessarily love it the whole time. As I got older, it really changed, so my passion for learning became also kind of that passion for education as well, because I know and have seen that not everybody has had and continues, right? There's still not equal access all the time to education. So, seeing that, and knowing my experience growing up and kind of being pushed to learn, right? Not everybody's going to have that person in their life, right, that pushes them to learn. And so it makes me want to be in education and be able to have an impact on that, and making sure that students can have those opportunities to learn, right? And that the resources that they need to be successful are there. And so that's really where my passion is, right? Yeah, learning's awesome, and all of that, but ultimately it comes down to people being able to access that learning, having the resources and tools at hand to be successful as well. And so, yeah, that's, as I've been in education more, my passion for that, I think, has grown. And I really see the impact, right, that the educational system can have on different people's lives and help them to succeed and gain, valuable skills and knowledge that they need to be successful in whatever path they choose.
Yeah, education's the great equalizer, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely. And Kyle, you said something that interests me. You said that access to education isn't always afforded to all students. And, I always say that talent is an equally distributable commodity, but sometimes the access to that isn't. So tell me, how do you think we eliminate the barriers to access to education for students that may experience some difficulties accessing the education?
Yeah, and I think that's a tough question and problem to solve, right? And I think it starts, the biggest thing, right, with anything with education and anything is making sure the funding's there for those different resources. And especially as we move, towards more online school, whether that's, K-12, right? That's been an increase in K through 12 school. It's been an increase in higher ed as well, in terms of having students attend school kind of in an online format. And so there's really two things there, right? That if we're thinking of accessibility, that I think a lot of us take for granted, right, is access to the internet and the technology to access the internet. Because a lot of us are on that daily, but not everybody has consistent access to those things. And so I think, making sure that those things are more accessible is one step. The other step, right, is also beyond, I think, the learning process of education, but also when we think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, those basic needs need to be met as well. And so there's, I think, again, a lot of people take for granted access to clean water, access to food, and that's not always the case. Not everybody has access to quality food. Not everybody has access to clean drinking water as well. And although that's adjacent to education, right, or education to be accessible, students need some of those needs to also be met. And that ties directly into their ability, I think, to be successful at whatever level of education that they're at, right? Because then they, again, if they have those things, those needs are being met, they'll have more time, they'll have more energy, and they'll have more cognitive load to focus on their goals educationally, and they'll be able to spend more time working on those things. And then ultimately, right, if you can spend more time, you can spend more mental energy on those things. Your likelihood of success increases as well. So I think for me, it's just making sure that those various things that we're making sure students at all levels have access to some of those basic needs, but also some of those required needs for education, like internet and technology, and making sure there's ways that those things can, making sure there's ways that we can connect students with resources to access those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a trio of questions left for you, and the first of the three questions for you, Kyle, is for any aspiring educator, I'm curious, what would be your piece of advice for anyone who aspires to enter the field of education and be successful? What do you think the roadmap to be successful in the field of education is from a professional standpoint?
Yeah, I think, and these are things that I've, had to learn as well. But I think for me, the two things that I would probably tell people the most, looking to enter, an educational field at any level is flexibility and patience, because you've got to, whether you're working directly with students or directly with faculty or whatever that role may be, you're working with people with different expectations, people with different ways of accomplishing things. They have different experiences that they're bringing into that situation. Their different backgrounds they're bringing into that. And so I think it's very important to be flexible and being able to not necessarily work within the way that's most comfortable to you, but finding ways to work with other people that they're comfortable with doing things as well. And so you have to be flexible if you want to meet those goals. If you stay too rigid in education, you're not going to get things done probably, and probably end up being kind of frustrated with the things you're trying to do. And then the other part of that is patience. You've got to have patience with people. You've got to have patience with processes. Like with anything, somebody may think this needs to be done in this timeline. You may think it needs to be done in this timeline. And maybe it doesn't get done. Maybe you don't have control over when it gets done. And so you've got to have some patience to kind of work within those different processes that are going on within the educational system, because there's a lot of different parts that are moving. There's different, influence, whether that's governmental or more university levels. So there's always influences. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's being flexible and being patient because you're working with people. And I think those are two skills that you have to be able to kind of work with those people. And the people that you're working with, like I've said, are the backgrounds are different, whether that be educational, cultural backgrounds. All of those things are at play. And so you have to be able to kind of work within those different environments and with those people that are people are different. Everybody's got different expectations. And so you have to be able to work with those people. And to do that, I think you've got to be flexible and you've got to be patient.
Oh, well, I think you can apply that to every aspect of life, right?
Yeah, probably, yes. And that's, yeah. So I think those are two easy things to think about, right? As they're not, career, they're not dependent to one area, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think, and those are two things, like I said, for me that I've as I have grown in my role as an instructional designer, are two things that I've really had to learn. And especially the patience part is just being able to wait and say, okay, I've done my task, or I'm just waiting, and you have to be patient on some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kyle, my final question for you is a two-parter, my friend. What's the best part about living and working in Oklahoma, and what do you think of your own personal and professional legacy? How do you want that to be defined?
Yeah, so in terms of just like working and living in Oklahoma, so I've actually lived in Oklahoma my whole life, so I don't know much different in terms of living, but I think the best thing for me is I have young kids, and then I have a lot of family that live around here, so it's just nice being close to some of those resources with family, and being able to see them regularly. And also just kind of the pace of life in Oklahoma is about the way that I would want it to be. It's not too fast. It's not too slow. It's not too crowded, right? So it's just kind of like, yeah, in that sense, it's really nice. Um, for living, if you kind of like a slower pace, and don't necessarily want to get stuck in a bunch of traffic necessarily every day. So I think those are the things for me. Just like I said, just family, and then just kind of the pace of life is the way that I like it. Could go without the tornadoes and the hailstorms though, but you got to take some of the bad with the good sometimes,
It's
on those things.
it's the sense of adventure, right, Kyle?
Yeah. Everybody wants to run to their tornado shelter every now and then.
Uh, well, that only makes it imperative that you live in houses with a basement, right? No.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, we have a storm shelter that's outside, so that makes it a little tricky sometimes if it's already like hailing and stuff. You've got to go outside and climb down into the storm shelter. Um,
Well,
so
it it improves your cardio, if nothing else, right?
yeah, you got to dodge the hail and the debris as you're running to get in.
Absolutely. What about your legacy, buddy? What when you look at your life, how do you want your legacy to be defined?
Yeah, and that's honestly a question probably don't think about the answer to a whole lot. But as I was thinking about that, for me, I think it's easy for us to define success or a legacy a certain way, right? Whether that be, especially today with social media, right? We could say, look at all my followers or things like that. But for me, there's things that I value above things like that. And it comes down to kindness, being hardworking, being helpful, and then just showing genuine empathy to others. So, I think all of those things across both my professional or personal legacy, those are, hopefully the things people remember, and hopefully that's the legacy that I leave behind. When I think about that, I have two young daughters and then a son that's going to be born at the end of the month. Um, and so in my conversations with them, that's kind of, I'm always trying to encourage them, right? Like once she's 7 and she's starting to worry, like, oh, do I look cool? Things like that. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like in the long run, right? Nobody's gonna remember when you're 40 if you were cool, right? Those things fade. Being cool fades, being athletic fades, right? And even sometimes our minds fade, right? And so there's things that we can work on that we can use those things to make an impact on those around us by being kind, being patient, being helpful, right? Being hardworking and showing empathy to others. And so hopefully those are the things that my personal and professional legacy are defined by. One example that I think of on those, and somebody that probably has inspired me, right, to live that way and kind of aspire for those things, was my grandma. Um, and she didn't really have a professional legacy, didn't really work a lot, due to the time of and age of when she lived, right? It was just kind of the expectation more to do those home things for her. But as she got older, she really got out and did a lot of serving and working with people. And when people ask, or mention her, right, it's never like, oh, she was successful, she was smart, she was funny, she was driven, right? Those are never the words people use. It's always things like she was so kind, she was so sweet, and she was always willing to help people. So it's always those kind of things. And so that's kind of what I aspire for in my professional and personal legacy as well.
Fabulous. And Kyle, if I were to tell you if people want to get connected with you personally or the good work that you do at the University of Oklahoma, my friend, tell me the best way they can accomplish that goal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on. I would say LinkedIn is probably the easiest because I don't post a lot on there, but I do check that pretty regularly. I have Twitter and Instagram, but I don't really use those uh, very often in terms of posting or anything like that. So not a lot of information on there, but if people wanted to connect, I am on those things, but I'd say LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Um, Way to find me or connect because it's probably although I don't post on there often, it is something that I check more regularly than the others.
Fabulous. Well, Kyle, I really want to thank you for your work in advancing forward educational equity for students at the University of Oklahoma, my friend. Your work in the space and time on my behalf this morning is most appreciated. And I want to thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate your time as well and the thoughtful questions just about education, about instructional design work, and all of that.